Welcome back to A Game of Fangs and Threads. My name's Hannah, and this is my June wrap up. Now, in June, I've had an interesting month, let's just say. I read a total of 11 books, and I am only going to talk about 7 of those today. The reason being, 4 of those books are for a secret vlog project that is still ongoing. So, these aren't in any particular order, but we are just going to dive right in. So, what is it? It's in order of when I read them. So, first off, we have Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This follows Emefuela and Obinse, who are in Lagos. Now, the story starts when they are teenagers. They fall in love, and then circumstances separate them. Ifemelu ends up in America, whereas Obinse ends up going to the UK to work as an undocumented immigrant. And it is basically their story of how they manage. Now, Obinse ends up coming back to Lagos and becoming a wealthy businessman, and Ifemelu ends up staying in America to finish her studies, where she becomes the successful owner of a blog, an online blog, and then comes home to Lagos because she's feeling... Actually, I'm not sure. I can't remember. I think it's because she's feeling homesick and she just wants to go back to what she knows, because Lagos has gone from being the downtrodden sort of backwater, almost state city, to the busy metropolis of the country. I can't remember if Lagos is the city or the town or the country or the state, but that's on me, that's not on this book. Now, I ended up giving this a 3-star. There was nothing wrong with it, I just wasn't interested, and that's not the book's fault, that's a me thing. This is women's fiction. I don't really read women's fiction. I tend to read romance and fantasy more exclusively. I mean, there are other things on my shelf, the likes of the Christina Henry books, my middle grade shrine over there. I have some darker fantasy, and there's a little slice of life there. So it's just because it's not what I normally read, it just has to be a bit more spectacular if it's not fantasy for me to enjoy it, and that's a me thing. It's not a book thing. But because that only got 3 stars, and I'm probably not going to reread it, it's going to go on and up. It's going to get on hold to somebody who would appreciate it more. The same can be said for Empress Crowned in Red by Sian Smart. This is the sequel to Witches Steeped in Gold, and again, this got a 3-star. I don't know what was happening with my reading, but the majority of these books are 3 stars. But this is obviously the sequel to Witches Steeped in Gold, which is right there, I think. Yeah, it's right there. Which is a YA fantasy novel following 2 witches who are in a battle to reclaim their heritage. We have Jasmine, who is the daughter of the ruling Diane, the ruling queen, who was overthrown by Araya. Now, Araya is the daughter of the ex-Diane and has been in prison for the majority of her life, if I'm remembering right. I think with this one, I left too much time between reading the first book and the conclusion, but I just didn't find this enjoyable at all. I don't think I've grown out of my YA era, but I think I'm just becoming a little bit more picky with what I read, which, is fine. Not every book is for everyone. But that being said, I gave this a 3-star, and I can't talk too much about it because, again, it's a sequel. It's the conclusion, but it doesn't feel solid. She says as she hits a hardback cover. But yeah, it just didn't do it for me. I don't think anything was resolved particularly well. It just felt a bit rushed, and the characters, I didn't buy their relationships. They didn't seem, especially Jasmine and Araya, they did not seem fleshed out at all. It felt like, and because it's told in dual perspective, sometimes I forgot who I was reading from because the perspectives just felt too similar. But I will be keeping an eye out to see whatever else Sian and Smart comes up with, because I do believe that Witches Steeped in Gold and Empress Crowned in Red were brilliant premises. They had a really good idea. It just maybe a bit too big to pull off satisfactorily, for me at least. But this and Witches Steeped in Gold will be going in the unhaul pile. Get back in the TBR cart. Then we had another sequel, and unfortunately another 3-star, and that was The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake. Now this one, although it's a 3-star, I am keeping because it's a second book. Second books in trilogies are hard, so I want to see how I feel about the Atlas Paradox, the Atlas Complex, before I make a decision on this series. I just felt like nothing really happened in this one. So I mean, if you don't know, the Atlas 6 follows 7 major point of views. At the start, these are all magicians in a world where magic is accepted. Magic is like something you can study. And we follow 7 people who are invited to study and become initiates of the Atlas Society. Now, there are only going to be 6 people carry on through to the next year. It's like a postgraduate study where they are each instructed to pick a specialism and use that to further the knowledge of the Atlas, of the Alexandrian Library, the Alexandrian Society. Now, however, 7 people are invited, only 6 will continue through. So the first book is obviously who are the 6 and what happens to that 7th person. This is the fallout, and while I find it had promise, let's just put it that way, it had promise, and because not a lot seemed to happen in the plot, it was very character focused, and those aren't technically my favourite. Typically I am a plot reader. I don't mind, I like a bit of character development, but I don't like it when characters solely develop the story. I need a plot. Characters can have an influence on the plot, but for me there needs to be that strong plot, that strong storyline, and for me this didn't really have it. And there was a lot of time where, okay, so these characters all live together. It's been a couple of months, I think it's about a year maybe, since the events of the Atlas 6, which is that wonky looking hardback up there. These people, despite living in, I think it's just like an average size house, it's like an apartment complex size building, not like a mansion, but you know, it's big enough to decently house these people. They haven't spoken to each other or seen each other in that whole time. That just doesn't work for me, because there's 4 of us. For example, I live with my parents and my sister. We all have our own lives. Sometimes we're like ships passing in the night, but because of how small this house is and the fact that to get to my room you have to go through my sister's, there will be time when we see these people. I do not understand how in a shared accommodation where there's one kitchen, a couple of bathrooms. People do not interact. They don't bump into each other on the stairs. So for that, it did. The longer I've thought about this, the more I think, yeah, that makes no sense. The whole other aspect of it, which I can't tell you because of spoilers, that makes sense. It could have had more to it, but it makes sense. And I appreciate that this is a very vague review, but this book, despite being a 3-star, is staying. Simply because I'm going to know how it ends. Which is a good enough reason, isn't it? Then we have Horseman by Christina Henry. This is a standalone inspired by the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and maybe this is a me thing, but I only know the Legend of Sleepy Hollow from the Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci movie, which I do actually enjoy. But this sort of flips it on its head a little bit, as most Christina Henry books do. And it follows Ben, who is the Okay, before I go into this, I do need to explain one thing. Ben is female, but refers to themselves as a boy. They think they were meant to be a boy. So for the sake of this synopsis, this review, I will be using he, him pronouns. Even though there are a couple of characters in this book that still refer to Ben as female. But because Ben themselves refers to themselves as he and him, that's what I'll be doing. So, Ben's grandfather is Abraham Bones, who was there when the Horseman allegedly chased Ichabod Crane out of town. Now, it's been about 30 odd years since those events, and the Horseman has faded to myth, to a bit of a local legend, and Sleepy Hollow is a town stuck. But it has its own magic in that if you believe something is true, it turns out to be true. Now, I loved that premise. That dark, gothic. Is it supernatural? Is it just paranoia? That kind of vibe. It just wasn't there for me. This didn't hit. But that could have been the fact that I wasn't reading it at night. I think books of this nature, and I can only speak for Christina Henry and Sylvia Moreno Garcia because of Mexican Gothic, I think the time in which you read those books does play a massive part in setting the atmosphere. I read this in the start of summer. I think I actually read it on the longest day, if I'm remembering my meteorological science correct. So the outside influence wasn't helping, because this is a book that is dark and gothic, and in it Ben and his friend like to play the Horseman, the Sleepy Hollow Boys, recreating the infamous tale of when Brom chased the crane out. Now remember that. But Bren and his friend do come across a headless body in the woods, which starts off a series of discoveries. And what follows is a murder mystery with that supernatural question of, is this the Horseman? Is it somebody else? What the heck is going on? And for that, I did enjoy it, but it did only get a 3-star. Now, I think, like the Atlas 6, that trilogy, I think I'm going to keep this for now and see if I want to read it again in spooky time to see if that makes a difference, because I think I read Girl in Red about Halloweeny. That is the Red Riding Hood take, and the Alice book, I just read that whenever, but I prefer Alice in Wonderland retellings over traditional fairy tales. But that being said, 3 stars, and I think for now I will keep it, but I'm not 100% of when I will if I will reread this one. But 3 stars, and I am still continuing on with Christina Henry because I have Looking Glass, I think that one is off the top of my head, to read, which is the sequel to Alice. Then we go into our Kindle books. We have When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. This is a new debut author, and it is romantasy. It is a big book, and this will tell you how much I love this book. The print edition is like 696 pages. I read it on ebook. I read it within a day. Okay, granted, I was at my partner's Will's and we tend to go to bed later, but still, I could not put this book down. Dragons. Intelligent dragons at that. So, before I start gushing, if you haven't heard, let me tell you about When the Moon Hatched. So I'll just read the synopsis because I think that'll do this a better job, because this will just turn into a gush. The creators did not expect their beloved dragons to sail skyward upon their end, to curl into balls just beyond gravity's grip, littering the sky with tombstones, with moons. They certainly did not expect them to fall. Then it goes on, but this is what we need. That just sets the scene perfectly. So in this world, the gods are very prevalent at the start in setting the scene, and the gods do influence the magic users of this world. Now we follow Rave, R-A-E-V-E. I've heard a couple of different ways of people saying that, but I would say Rave. She is an assassin with memory loss. She can't remember what happened before she was found by the rebellion group. And I'm probably going to butcher this because it looks Irish. Irish is not a language I speak. And that is Fir Death. I think that's how you say it. But basically, they are the rebellion group rebelling against the crown, the prince, the king, that good stuff that we always have in a traditional fantasy. And she's a bit of an assassin, but she is caught by a bounty hunter, and there is a very gruesome scene where she bites off his thumb, or I think it's his finger, actually. I think it's his little finger. But that just tells you everything you need to know about Rave and the bounty hunter, because the bounty hunter is a prick. But she escapes with the help of Khan, K-A-A-N Vega, who is, and they are all fae. So we're ticking all the boxes in this one, aren't we? Dragons, romantasy, warrior, fae, assassin. It's no wonder I like this book. I absolutely adore this book. So much so that I can't tell you anything about it other than vibes. Yes, everything. If you know me at all, you'll know that there is a certain trope, especially in YA fiction. Throne of Glass has it. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think The Prison Healer has it to a degree. Maybe A Touch of Chaos, to some extent, has this trope, and I can't tell you what the trope is because of spoilers, because it is a plot pointy trope, but it runs the risk of being overdone. But this one gives you just enough of a twist on it that it feels fresh, and it is that trope that I fall for every single time, and I think it actually plays into my books as well. If you do want to know what that trope is, I will just ask me in the comments, because I don't want to give spoilers for When the Moon Hatched at all. But suffice to say, I gave that 5 stars, and I think it might be my favourite book of the year, or at least very high up in that list. And I cannot wait for the sequel. I don't think it has a name yet. If it does, somebody please tell me. If we have any information on this book, please let me know. I bought it on Kindle Unlimited, but I think I will probably get myself a copy, probably on Kindle, just because it's a chunky book and I'm running out of shelf space. But ranty, venty, gushy review over. We did have a couple of accidental rereads, and as you know, I don't tend to review and rate the rereads as much as I do new books, because I already know the series, I already know the story, which is why we have my secret project TBR here, which is handily just out of shot. But we'll go back to what I was talking about. So we have The Queen of Eoflaria by Effie Calvin. This was a quick little romantasy again, I would say, dragon book. It's probably only a novella. Don't know how many pages again, because ebook. Excuse me. But I read that because I thought I hadn't, and then went back and actually had. But the Queens of Eoflaria follows, I cannot remember names, but it follows two characters, one of which is a princess from one country who has been sent to marry the prince of another. They've been betrothed since birth, and then they finds out that the prince was actually killed in an accident. Now, our main character is a very girly girl, nothing wrong with that, and she's very mystical, let's just say. She's in touch with her powers, and she decides that she's here already, the contract's been signed, let's make the most of it and get the dragon problem in Eoflaria a little bit under control. Now, in this world, gender doesn't matter. You can marry a woman, you can marry a man. In the more royal families, obviously marrying the opposite sex is encouraged, shall we say, because of the whole issue of heirs. But that's not to say that same-sex couples can't have their own children, because there is a thing called the switch, and and whoever's performing the switch, provided that they can maintain will and concentration and their own magic is strong enough, they can procreate as the opposite sex, hopefully resulting in an heir. So with that in mind, our main character ends up falling in love with the prince's sister. Oh, it starts off as just like a transaction, a marriage of not convenience, but a legal ceremony, a legal commitment, because the paperwork's already been signed. But they get their chalk and cheese on paper. They are completely opposite, but they learn to respect and trust each other, and there is just a cute little scene at the end, because the dragons in this world are pests. Well, that's the way they are seen to be, and it's just in the way of these things we realise that it is not. And the last book I'm going to talk about, now this is a funny story. It is Temerae by Naomi Novik. It's again Intelligent Dragons. It's a reread in a new format. By that I mean I was clearing out my shelves and I accidentally donated my physical copy of Temerae, and then only realised once I got rid of it. So of course, hopped onto Amazon, downloaded the Kindle version of the first book and the second, because I absolutely adore that series. I mean, I've only read the first book, but that was a 5-star reread. Oh, and Eoflaria the Queen of Eoflaria was about 4. There was something that I just didn't quite understand, didn't quite get, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, back onto Temerae. Now, this is set in the Napoleonic Wars, or at least the first book is, and we have dragons. So, at this point, if I remember real history correctly, in the time of Napoleon and... oh crap, I can't remember the English captain's name. It's not Churchill, he's too late, but anyway. Is it Brownie Prince Charlie? Either way. What was I saying? Oh yes, Napoleon. So the Napoleonic Wars, and we follow Will Lawrence, Captain Will Lawrence, who is a Navy man, on board a very impressive ship taking a French ship captive. He's already got the captain on board, and to save, lives, that kind of thing, the captain surrenders. They've already burnt the logs, so nobody knows exactly what this ship is carrying. But when Captain Lawrence's crew go to investigate, they find a dragon egg. Now, in this world, dragons are intelligent and they are used primarily as the Air Force. They are air support. A wild dragon is incredibly dangerous and isn't even used for breeding half the time. So the Navy crew, including Lawrence, draw lots to see if anybody will be able to harness this beast if and when it hatches, as a safety concern, because the aviators, who are the dragon riders of this world, live kind of weird in society. They live alone because they are tied to the will of this dragon and the Royal Aviator Corps, I think it's called. So it's unfair for them to ask any woman to give up a comfortable life, a society life. So they are outcast from society while also being respected by that society. So nobody, because Navy men, depending on their status, sort of fit into society as well. So it would mean giving up. If a dragon did accept a harness from you, it would mean giving up the life of everything you knew, a comfortable living, that kind, friends, family, the chance of a prosperous match in the marriage market, all that kind of good stuff that we know from Bridgerton. Now, what Lawrence does is very diplomatic. He excludes any members of his crew who are married and have children or children on the way, because it's not fair for them to give up that, and you can't ask a wife to give up her husband. So that's fair. And he puts his name in. So obviously the dragon hatches. He doesn't, Lawrence doesn't draw his name. It is another crew member who draws their name, but the dragon does not accept the original ballot. The dragon talks to Lawrence upon hatching, and it is Lawrence who ends up harnessing the beast, who he names Temeraire after a Navy frigate. I think it's a frigate. A very important ship. But as their connection grows, we realise that Temeraire, the dragon, is more than he appears. He is so intelligent, so quick-witted, and slowly but surely the bond grows. And also Lawrence realizes that the dragons the aviators keep could probably be looked after a little bit better, which causes some friction. And then we find out Temeraire's true origin, and it all goes from there. So suffice to say, 1, still a 5-star. 2, as soon as I can, I will be picking up the sequel. Now, did I put the sequel in the jar or not? I can't remember. But I'll pop the sequel into my TBR jar. But I think that's all the books I can talk about without spoiling the secret project, which should be finished fairly soon, hopefully. But I have rambled on and gushed long enough about these books, so with that, I think I'm going to end the video. So give it a like if you like it, and hit that subscribe button if you want to see this, talk about these, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.